Good afternoon and welcome to The Breakdown. I'm your host, Stephen Oswald, and this week we have with us my friend Kayla, who is currently on the path to finishing up her college career. And today we're going to be reading and discussing a poem titled Still I Rise, who was written by Dr. Maya Angelou. Kayla, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Great. So let's kind of like dive in and let's talk about this poem. What is this poem about?
This poem is about the resiliency of the human spirit, like regardless of color, but especially for Black people in America. And I would say, especially for women in America. Um, and I think those two, intersections are represented by Dr. Angelou, but I think can apply to everybody. And she's expressed that it can apply to everybody. And so I love this poem for um, just a universal message of resilience that can be applied to anybody trying to make it.
I love that. And in many ways, actually, this kind of reminds me of Langston Hughes and a lot of his work, only this feels more like a voice for more females out there who really kind of get lost amongst poets. I know it's kind of rare. So speaking about that, there aren't a lot of famous female poets. So what can you tell us about Dr. Angelou and kind of what kind of person was she? What was her life like?
Dr. Angelou was not just a poet. She has written 7 autobiographies. She is a civil rights activist, was a civil rights activist. She was just there for a lot of really important parts of history and is, in my opinion, risen above any kind of title that could hold her. Like, I think she is just such an important person for Black culture in America and for women in America. And I think she's just kind of an icon and a legend.
I love it. I really do. And now I do want to dive more into this, but I believe you have a clip of the poem for us. So let's hear the poem first and kind of digest that, and then we'll dive into kind of
Perfect.
analyzing it a little bit more.
Yeah. I really want her to recite it because I think anything I would recite would be a really poor imitation. I think this is part of the experience is listening to her voice.
Perfect. All right, let's make it happen.
Okay.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my sassiness upset you? Don't take it so hard just because I laugh, as if I have gold mines digging in my own backyard. You can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but just like life, I rise. Does my sexiness offend you? Oh. Does it come as a surprise that I dance as if I have diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame I rise. Up from a past rooted in pain I rise. A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling and bearing in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear I rise. Into a daybreak miraculously clear I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the hope and the dream of the slave, and so.
That was wonderful. I mean, I've heard that poem once before, and I think it's a great poem. I love the energy, I love the emotion, and just the raw nature of it. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one wondering this, and I don't want you to necessarily speak on Dr. Angelou's behalf, but of course, what do you think was the inspiration for this poem? I mean, where do you think she kind of drew upon her experiences to create this?
Sorry. Um, I think like what a life she's living. It's hard. Like I don't know enough about the history of her life. Like I know a little bit, but hard to know what exactly inspiration she pulls from. But I think that what sticks out to me the most is this repetition of images of wealth. And so think, like I got oil wells, I got gold mines, I got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs, and like this claiming back of worthiness and of wealth that people of color or women oftentimes feel stripped of or left out of the conversation. And so that part really sticks out to me. Another part of Dr. Angelou's life is that she was once a sex worker, and I love how like sex positive this poem is. There's some undertones of that, and I think that really resonates with a lot of people, and that's a really important part too. A lot of imagery of that. So I think a lot of her life, but it's really applicable to a lot of people in a lot of ways, I think.
I agree. I feel like Dr. Angelou is just, she makes herself so vulnerable in talking about those experiences, but in a powerful way, in a way that really embodies that vulnerability as kind of like an armor or something to wear with honor and kind of adorn for people to see, to be like, this is who I am. And
Right.
kind of speaking of that power, do you have like a favorite verse of the poem or one that really resonates with you personally?
Ooh. Sorry, I wasn't prepared for that part. Let me look again. I mean, the whole thing really, I like this one. Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. And I feel like that is so applicable in this time today, like this day, like of right now, and this place in time where, in end of May 2020, I'm sure this will be, part of history. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's racial tensions are extremely high, and I think just the need for some people for others to feel oppressed, like wanting to see that oppression and having that resiliency and that hope as your currency, like something you can't take away from you no matter how much redlining happens, no matter how much oppression, bad bank practices, bail bonds, there's all kinds of stuff that holds people down, and like having this hope and resiliency as currency, like is really, really powerful. I love that stanza.
Yeah, that's absolutely incredible. And this is kind of stuff that I feel people don't necessarily talk about. I know you read poetry, and we talk about what's important to us and what means something to us, but it's just sometimes people touch on something that's such a deeper level that's so more applicable even across cultures and
Mm-hmm.
race. And speaking of that, I was just looking at how this poem was written back in 1978. But I would argue there's still a lot of relevance today, as we kind of just talked about. But more so, I want to ask you, you know, 30, 40 years later, still hearing this poem, it still holds so much relevance that what do you think this says about our society? I mean, do you think we've really improved from 1978 when this was written, or do you think we still have a ways to go before Still I Rise is less of a taboo poem for students to read and more of just kind of an embodiment of, to put it nicely, when do you think this poem will get the recognition that it deserves?
Interesting question. Whew. I mean, I hope that as in my career, I can be a person that keeps putting this poem out. Like, this is my favorite poem of all time, and I'm gonna be fighting the fight to make have this poem, recognized. And I think it is, very well celebrated. But to your question of when will racism be, sorry. I mean, I was just, I watched this video earlier. It's like there's been, there's 400 years of our American history was slavery, and 100 plus years of segregation, and now we're in this like 60-year period of like what some people are considering like post-racial. I mean, it's not whatsoever. But I do think like it is getting better, slowly, painfully, horrifically, but it is getting better, and it will continue to get better. And I think by sharing things like this poem with students and young people of color and not of color, of women and men. I think giving this perspective and voice is like one drop in the bucket in creating generations that continue to change, and hopefully throughout history will be on that upward movement and not going backwards, staying stagnant.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Again, I keep making references to Langston Hughes, but Dr. D'Angelo's approach reminds me of Langston Hughes' river idea. If we want this to succeed, we have to think of this as like a river, constantly pushing and flowing. Yeah, we can't remain stagnant. We have to keep chipping away, and even if it's just little by little, it's still so important. And it looks like we don't have a lot of time left, but before you go, I want to thank you first off. Thank you so much for sharing this poem and your insight with us. I really appreciate it. But
Thanks.
my last question is, do you have any advice for those aspiring poets and writers out there, or even just advice for women who are looking to find a voice in this world?
I think my advice I would take also from Dr. Angelou, which is write every day. She said writing is as ingrained in her life as eating or listening to music. That's not something I do very well in practice, but something I'm trying to get better at. Is writing is like lifting weights. Like, you get better at it the more you do it. And I think being proud of your experiences, like Dr. Angelou, talking about being a sex worker, said, I've done nothing wrong. And so knowing like your experiences, no matter what they are not shameful. They're valuable. Every experience is worthwhile and worth talking about. And so writing about your life and your experience. And I think if you are not a person of color or not somebody that's been marginalized, making space for those voices. That's my advice.
That's some powerful advice. I could not have thought of a better way to end this little interview. Kayla, thank you so much for being on the show this week and breaking down Still I Rise by Dr. Maya Angelou. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.